Judges 8. Then the men of Ephraim said to him, What is this thing you have done to us, not calling us when you went to fight against Midian? And they strongly contended with him. But he said to them, What have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the grape harvest of Abiezer? God has given the princes of Midian, Oreb, and Zeb into your hands. And what was I able to do in comparison with you? Then their anger toward him subsided when he spoke this word. Then Gideon and the 300 men who were with him came to the Jordan and crossed over, weary yet pursuing. And he said to the men of Succoth, Please give loaves of bread to the people who are following me, for they are weary, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. But the princes of Succoth said, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hands, that we should give bread to your army? And Gideon said, Thus, when Yahweh has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then I will thrash your bodies with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. So he went up from there to Penuel, and spoke similarly to them. And the men of Penuel answered him just as the men of Succoth had answered. So he spoke also to the men of Penuel, saying, When I return safely, I will tear down this tower. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, and their camps with them, about 15,000 men, all who were left of the entire camp of the sons of the east, for the fallen were 120,000 men who drew the sword. And Gideon went up by the way of those who dwelt in tents on the east of Nobah and Jogbehah, and struck the camp when the camp was unsuspecting. Then Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued them and captured the 2 kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and threw the whole camp into utter fright. Then Gideon the son of Joash returned from the battle by the ascent of Heres, and he captured a youth from the men of Succoth and questioned him. So the youth wrote down for him the princes of Succoth and its elders, 77 men. Then he came to the men of Succoth and said, Behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you reproached me, saying, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hand, that we should give bread to your men who are weary? Then he took the elders of the city, as well as thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth a lesson. And he tore down the tower of Penuel and killed the men of the city. Then he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, What kind of men were they whom you killed at Tabor? And they said, They were like you, each one resembling the son of a king. And he said, They were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As Yahweh lives, if only you had let them live, I would not kill you. So he said to Jether his firstborn, Rise, kill them. But the youth did not draw his sword, for he was afraid because he was still a youth. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, Rise up yourself and smite us, for as the man, so is his might. So Gideon arose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna, and took the crescent ornaments which were on their camels' necks. Then the men of Israel said to Gibeon, Rule over us, both you and your son, also your son's son, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. But Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. Yahweh shall rule over you. Yet Gideon said to them, I would make one request of you, that each of you give me an earring from his spoil. For they had gold earrings, because they were Ishmaelites. And they said, We will surely give them. So they spread out a garment, and every one of them threw an earring there from his spoil. And the weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants, and the purple robes which were on the kings of Midian, and besides the neckbands that were on their camels' necks. Then Gideon made it into an ephod and placed it in his city, Ophrah, and all Israel played the harlot with it there, so that it became a snare to Gideon and his household. So Midian was subdued before the sons of Israel, and they did not lift up their heads any more, and the land was quiet for 40 years in the days of Gideon. Then Jerubbaal the son of Joash went and lived in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons who were his direct descendants, for he had many wives. And his concubine who was in Shechem also bore him a son, and he named him Abimelech. Then Gideon the son of Joash died at a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Then it happened, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the sons of Israel turned back and played the harlot with the Baals, and made Baal-berith their god. Thus the sons of Israel did not remember Yahweh their God, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. Nor did they show loving kindness to the household of Jerubbaal, that is, Gideon, in accord with all the good that he had done to Israel. Acts 12. Now about that time Herod the king laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to harm them. And he had James the brother of John put to death with a sword. And when he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. Now it was during the days of unleavened bread. When he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out before the people. So Peter was kept in the prison, but prayer for him was being made fervently by the church to God. Now on the very night when Herod was about to bring him forward, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and guards in front of the door were watching over the prison. And behold, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared, and a light shone in the cell. And he struck Peter's side and woke him up, saying, Rise up quickly. And his chains fell off his hands. And the angel said to him, Gird yourself and put on your sandals. And he did so. And he said to him, Wrap your garment around yourself and follow me. And he went out and continued to follow. And he did not know that what was being done by the angel was real, but was thinking he was seeing a vision. And when they had passed the first and second guard posts, they came to the iron gate that leads into the city, which opened for them by itself. And they went out and went along one street, and immediately the angel departed from him. When Peter came to himself, he said, Now truly I know that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting. And when he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who was also called Mark, where many were gathered together and were praying. And when he knocked at the door of the gate, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer. And when she recognized Peter's voice, because of her joy she did not open the gate, but she ran in and reported that Peter was standing in front of the gate. And they said to her, You are out of your mind. But she kept insisting that it was so. They kept saying, It is his angel. But Peter continued knocking, and when they opened the door, they saw him and were astounded. But motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he recounted to them how the Lord had led him out of the prison. And he said, Report these things to James and the brothers. Then he left and went to another place. Now when day came, there was no small disturbance among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. And when Herod had searched for him and had not found him, he examined the guards and ordered that they be led away to execution. Then he went down from Judea to Caesarea and was spending time there. Now he was very angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon, and with one accord they came to him, and having won over Blastus the king's chamberlain, they were asking for peace, because their country was fed by the king's country. And on an appointed day Herod, having put on his royal apparel and sitting on the judgment seat, began delivering an address to them. And the assembly kept crying out, The voice of a God and not of a man. And immediately an angel of the Lord struck him, because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and breathed his last. But the word of the Lord continued to grow and to be multiplied. And Barnabas and Saul returned to Jerusalem, fulfilling their ministry, taking along with them John, who was also called Mark. Jeremiah 21. The word which came to Jeremiah from Yahweh when King Zedekiah sent him to Pashur, the son of Malchijah, and Zephaniah the priest, the son of Maaseiah, saying, Please inquire of Yahweh on our behalf, for Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, is warring against us. Perhaps Yahweh will deal with us according to all his wonderful acts, so that the enemy will go up from us. Then Jeremiah said to them, Thus you shall say to Zedekiah, Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, Behold, I am about to turn back the weapons of war which are in your hands, with which you are warring against the king of Babylon and the Chaldeans who are besieging you outside the wall, and I will gather them into the center of this city. I myself will war against you with an outstretched hand and a strong arm, even in anger and wrath and great indignation. I will also strike down the inhabitants of this city, both man and beast. They will die of a great pestilence. Then afterwards, declares Yahweh, I will give over Zedekiah king of Judah and his servants and the people, even those who remain in this city from the pestilence, the sword and the famine, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon, and into the hand of their enemies, and into the hand of those who seek their lives. And he will strike them down with the edge of the sword. He will not show pity on them, nor spare them, nor have compassion. You shall also say to this people, Thus says Yahweh, Behold, I set before you the way of life and the way of death. He who inhabits this city will die by the sword, and by famine, and by pestilence. But he who goes out and falls away to the Chaldeans who are besieging you will live, and he will have his own life as spoil. For I have set my face against this city for evil and not for good, declares Yahweh. It will be given into the hand of the king of Babylon, and he will burn it with fire. Then say to the household of the king of Judah, Hear the word of Yahweh. O house of David, thus says Yahweh, Render justice every morning, and deliver the person who has been robbed from the power of his oppressor, lest my wrath go forth like fire, and burn with none to extinguish it, because of the evil of their deeds. Behold, I am against you, O inhabitant of the valley, O rocky plain, declares Yahweh. You men who say, Who will come down against us? Or who will enter into our dwelling places? But I will punish you according to the results of your deeds, declares Yahweh, and I will kindle a fire in its forest, that it may devour all its surroundings. Mark 7. And the Pharisees and some of the scribes gathered around him when they had come from Jerusalem, and had seen that some of his disciples were eating their bread with defiled hands, that is, unwashed. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they carefully wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. And when they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash themselves. And there are many other things which they have received in order to observe, such as the washing of cups and pitchers and copper pots. And the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, Why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat their bread with defiled hands? And he said to them, Rightly did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far away from me. But in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commands of men. Leaving the commandment of God, you hold to the tradition of men. And he was also saying to them, You are good at setting aside the commandment of God in order to keep your tradition. For Moses said, Honor your father and your mother, and he who speaks evil of father or mother is to be put to death. But you say, If a man says to his father or his mother, Whatever you might benefit from me is Corban, that is to say, given to God, you no longer leave him to do anything for his father or his mother, thus invalidating the word of God by your tradition, which you have handed down, and you do many things such as that. And after he called the crowd to him again, he began saying to them, Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside the man which can defile him if it goes into him, but the things which proceed out of the man are what defile the man. And if anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. And when he had left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples were asking him about the parable. And he said to them, Are you lacking understanding in this way as well? Do you not perceive that whatever goes into the man from outside cannot defile him, because it does not go into his heart, but into his stomach, and goes to the sewer? Thus he declared all foods clean. And he was saying, That which proceeds out of the man, that is what defiles the man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed the evil thoughts, sexual immoralities, thefts, murders, adulteries, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these evil things proceed from within and defile the man. Now Jesus stood up and went away from there to the region of Tyre. And when he had entered a house, he was wanting no one to know of it, yet he could not escape notice. But after hearing of him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately came and fell at his feet. Now the woman was a Greek, of Syrophoenician descent, and she kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he was saying to her, "Let the children be satisfied first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she answered and said to him, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs under the table feed on the children's crumbs." And he said to her, "Because of this answer, go, the demon has gone out of your daughter." And going back to her home, she found the child lying on the bed, the demon having left. And again he went out from the region of Tyre, and came through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee within the region of the Decapolis. And they brought to him one who was deaf and spoke with difficulty, and they pleaded with him to lay his hand on him. And Jesus took him aside from the crowd by himself, and put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting he touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven with a sigh, he said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, "be opened." And his ears were opened, and the impediment of his tongue was removed, and he began speaking plainly. And he gave them orders not to tell anyone, but the more he was ordering them, the more widely they continued to proclaim it. And they were utterly astonished, saying, "He has done all things well. He makes even the deaf to hear and the mute to speak."